Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. You know, the best verse to define what he means here, I think, if I were you, I would write in the margin, beside verse 1 of Romans 12, 6:13, to refer back to Romans 6:13. And I would write beside Romans 6:13, 12:1. Let me read it for you and see if it doesn't sound like an exposition of the holy sacrifice of your body. Romans 6:13. Do not present your members. Now that means your hands and feet, the members of your body. Do not present the members of your body to sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, living sacrifice, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. That's what I think he means by holy. Present your body to God holy. That is, for purposes that I design, especially righteousness. Accomplish righteousness with your body. I'll give you 3 examples where the New Testament describes the action of the body as a sacrifice to God. Philippians 4:18. Paul says, I have received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent. So the Philippians had collected money, put it in the hands of Epaphroditus, sent it to Rome. Gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. This was bodily people exerting bodily labor to earn physical money that you can hold in your hand, putting it in a physical bag, handing it to hands of an Epaphroditus who put it in his belt around his stomach and walked with his feet or in a boat all the way to Rome, took it out with his hands with a bright face and put it in the hands of the Apostle Paul. That's bodies doing righteousness and mercy, and it's called a sacrifice pleasing and acceptable to God. That is worship. He's on the boat, he's throwing up because he's seasick on the way to Rome. That's worship throwing up. Here's the second example. Hebrews 13:15. Through Christ then, let us continually offer up the sacrifice of praise to God that is the fruit of lips. Fruit of lips. This is my body, with which I am now making words. And he says, get your body into your praise. Oh, it's right to have a heart that sings with praise, filled with the Holy Spirit. Release it through lips, he's saying, and then he calls it a sacrifice pleasing to the Lord. One more example, the next verse in Hebrews 13, verse 16. Do not neglect to do good and share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. Doing good with your body, taking the things that you've accumulated that are physical, holdable, seeable, hearable, and sharing them with other people is what it means to worship God with your body in a holy way. Finally, number 4. The phrase acceptable to God. First we looked at body, then we looked at living, then we looked at holy. Finally we look at the phrase acceptable to God. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is, when you do that, it is spiritual worship. Now my question here is this, and we draw toward a close. What does the phrase acceptable to God add to the word holy? Because if something is holy, it's acceptable to God. That's the meaning of holy. It's acceptable to God. So is anything added to calling our bodily behavior as worship holy? Is there anything added by saying acceptable, pleasing to God? And at least this is added. God is made explicit. God is made explicit, which is so important because it's all moving to the end of the verse, which is your spiritual worship. And God is the center and focus of worship, that is life. And therefore it's fitting that you define holiness as acceptable to God. Get God as your orientation when you're thinking about the holiness or the acceptableness of your behavior.